Arindam Lahiri, please give us an introduction and an overview of ASDC.
Good afternoon, and thanks, team. I'm honored to be part of such a very, illustrious panel today, and a very interesting topic for discussion today. I currently head Automotive Skill Development Council as the CEO. As you would know, this is one of the 36 sector skill councils under the National Skills Development Corporation. And the Automotive Skill Development Council has been promoted by the three apex industry associations in the country, the Vehicle Manufacturers Association, SIAM, Component Manufacturers Association, ACMA, and the Dealers Association, FADA. We pretty much cover the entire value chain of the automotive industry in terms of working on skilling standards, creating standards, affiliating training partners, and working closely with industry to ensure that there is a constant supply of skilled manpower. It's a huge task given the scale of operations in India and the number of people that we talk about. But yes, this is a beginning, and we're just about to complete about 10 years of our existence as the first sector skill council in this country. Over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. I know it's we obviously work quite closely together. I know the massive challenge ahead, but again, as I said, I'm sure we'll explore that a bit further as well. So Omar Diop, over to you for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Omar Diop, and I work at the UNESCO New Delhi office here in India as the head of the education sector. So I've been with UNESCO for the last 15 years, and first I was in headquarters in Paris, then in Africa, and now posted in India. UNESCO is the custodian agency for the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which deals with quality inclusive education for all. So that is our main mandate. And how do we do that? We do work at all levels of education, from early childhood care and education, pre-primary, up to higher education. And not only on general education, but we do also work with non-formal settings, non-formal education settings, and then informal education settings, but also with the specific area of technical and vocational education training. Our mandate is quite upstream, so we do help the governments and the education providers and education stakeholders to kind of implement activities, and then we help them with policies and normative instruments. Very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a nice introduction. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Omar. And last but not least, Marcus, if you'd like to give a bit of a background about yourself and also, of course, the TÜV Rheinland Group.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And good morning or good afternoon to all of you around the world out there. Yeah, as Tim mentioned, I'm Marcus Dom, located in Germany, in the nice city of Cologne. I'm a German and 45 years old. I have a master's degree in civil engineering and a master's degree in business economics. I'm being the executive vice president, Academy and Life Care of TÜV Rheinland. TÜV Rheinland is a company which was founded and is headquartered in Germany. It is a global acting service provider for testing, inspection, certification, and training services. And the business division I run on global level is Academy and Life Care, and we focus on training services for our customers in a various field of trainings, but also occupational health and safety services and consultancy in the end to let people grow. That's it from my side. Happy to join the conference, and yeah, welcome to all of you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Marcus. So to get things off, one of the topics that is sort of very much at the tip of everybody's tongue at the moment is what the job market is going to look like in the future and what industry really demands. And when you look, for example, at topics from the World Economic Forum, so the World Economic Forum says that 65% of children that are entering primary education today will end up doing jobs that don't yet exist. So a big challenge in terms of adjusting the educational frameworks to really support the demands of industry in the future. And maybe Dr. Goel, I'll start with you to look a little bit more about what Bosch is doing in that instance in terms of really understanding industry requirements and how the training operations that you are working with are really looking to equip young students with the right skills to find work. Please give us your thoughts.
Sure, Tim, thanks. About this future of jobs, one thing we know is that we don't know enough. So we all have been struggling, working hard to find out how the future is going to look like. Few things to us in Bosch, and I think to all of us in general, are very clear. Technology is going to do more and more jobs which humans are doing now. We will still need some people, also on the shop floor as well as in the offices, but the kind of skill sets they would need would be very different, and the kind of job what they will be doing will be different than what they are currently doing. So in Bosch, what we have done is at the very basic level, at the very first level, we have started a digital fluency program wherein each employee of Bosch, irrespective of in what kind of job roles they are currently, have to become digitally fluent. As perhaps some of us know, Bosch also has a software company here in India. In fact, our main business is automotive, but the software company actually, in terms of the number of people employed, has become bigger than the main company itself here in India. And we have 22,000 engineers who provide software services to all the Bosch Group companies globally. So we rely on that company quite a lot of teaching us as to how the future of technology is going to look like. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, of course, are the names which we now come across every day. And we have developed training programs, not only for our own employees, but also as a part of CSR, where we train large number of youth in the country through a program called Bridge, where about 33,000 youth have already been trained and employed. We have now also started including the digital technologies there, which earlier these courses were purely based on the soft skills. So to summarize the findings of World Economic Forum, Tim, what you mentioned, which talks about self-management skills, people skills, problem-solving skills, and also all the managers and employees being more familiar and more comfortable in handling technologies. We have taken those findings quite seriously in Bosch, and we have started now working on these future skills which will be needed, which will take care of some of the jobs when the technology will try to make the people redundant.
Yeah, very good. I think the topic of core skills or employability skills is something that is also incredibly important. It's not just technical knowledge, but it's the ability to manage yourself, manage jobs, manage your development, enable career progression. They're all very important topics, which at the end of the day enable agility and flexibility in an, as you said, an ever-changing job market that will which, as you rightly said, none of us really know enough about yet. Yeah, so I think that's the main thing. Maybe just a brief follow-on question for that. So leading to the formal education sector. So obviously there's a difference between sort of technical and vocational education and the topic of today, which is the 4-year degree. And I know maybe you can give some insights, but I think in the Indian landscape, one of the challenges is recognition of qualifications. So if you're going through one form of education, particularly vocational education, how can that get recognized and enable for further learning and further education? And maybe Dr. Goel, you can give a little bit of insight into that in terms of how Bosch is dealing with that side of it. So enabling people who go through your training programs to get further educational opportunities.
Yes, Tim, I think the core title of this program, when you had mentioned the end of degree, If I look at it from the four key stakeholders perspective, the societal perspective, the belief all along that you need to go to college for 3 or 4 years after 12 years of schooling seems to be becoming irrelevant going forward, because the youngsters are becoming more and more street smart. They perhaps don't really need to spend 3 or 4 years in a college or a university just to become eligible to get an entry level job. If you look at the perspective from the industry, the traditional thought that once an employee comes in, they are going to remain here for long, so we can retrain them after their college degree, we can spend a lot of time and efforts and money on them in training them, does not seem to be making sense to the industry anymore, because we do not know how soon these people are going to leave the jobs and go away. So we are now talking of gig economy, where more and more people will be actually working on part-time basis. If you look at the perspective from the student itself, uh, all along thinking that I will be going to a college, university for 3-4 years and learning something, when there were no other ways of getting access to the information through the internet. Now all that information is available on the internet, so you only want to go to college to learn from the experts and not really spending such a long time. So these are some of the things. And if I also talk out from the education or from the government perspective, it does not make sense also for the government or for the education system to keep these youngsters for such a long time in their campuses and then give them the certificates which are not actually making them employable. So the entire focus has to be on the employability skills. So what in Bosch we have done is that we have now started working with the educational institutes, with the universities and the colleges more and more, and start helping them to modernize their curriculum so that some of the knowledge and skills which we need here in the industry are imparted to them while they are still in the college, and we do not have to do so much of the reskilling. So going forward, I see this personally, that the traditional degrees of 3 years or 4 years duration are not really going to make sense. Of course, there is already a lot of discussion here in the country where we are talking about multi-exit, multi-entry kind of modules. We are talking of NSQF framework. So these are the things which I feel are very, very relevant, where these youngsters do not really need to spend such a long time in the campus just to get prepared for an entry level job, and that also is not sure.
Very good. Yeah, I think really interesting insights there that, as I said, I think we'll come back to as well. And maybe to follow on from that, just in terms of the role of the 4-year degree, and actually a discussion that we had prior to the panel discussion was about, you know, the actual topic of what is a 4-year degree and where does that actually exist. And again, from my background in the UK and in Germany, a 4-year degree is relatively common depending on your field of specialization. But in India, as we discussed, it's generally a 3-year degree with some exceptions. And maybe Omar, from your perspective, I know UNESCO is doing quite a lot in the field of harmonization, if you like, of higher education. And maybe you can give us some insights into the work UNESCO is doing here.
Thank you, Tim. I think higher education is important and has its role in developing higher order research skills. In some occupations, it may not be required to have a higher education qualification. But it is clear that higher education needs reorientation. It can be made less academic and more professional. Increasingly, higher education degrees may not be valid as lifelong stamps of competence given the rapid pace of change. They need to be constantly updated with new skills. At UNESCO, we do promote the concept of lifelong learning. Learning never stops, and it is not limited to an age. So I would say the only alternative to learning with an aim to, for example, earn a 4-year degree is to learn every day without worrying about earning a degree. We must recognize that learning happens outside an educational institution as a formal setting. It can be a 4-year degree program or a 4-day course with well-structured curriculum leading to a certificate, or it can be your workplace where you learn from the environment and the people around you. This realization is that learning is taking place all the time is the first step. Now, since you're asking what UNESCO has been doing, I think there are, depending on the countries, we have several practices, and Tim has already said it. In Europe, most of European countries, for example, they comply to a 4-year degree, while in India, for example, sometimes it's comparable to some 3 years. So UNESCO has created what we adopted with the member states. So the countries, they voted at UNESCO, what we call the Global Convention on Higher Education. So basically, the Global Convention on Higher Education is a normative instrument that all the countries now are going to ratify. They will have national processes for the ratification of that Global Convention on Higher Education, which will put some kind of organization of what is needed actually to complete a degree. But we are moving towards to have alternatives to a traditional degree program. One good alternative could be, for example, the bite-sized courses that you can take at your own convenience. For example, to earn micro-credentials, which you can then stack or combine to form a full degree. So a more flexible and customized way to learn and to earn a 4-year degree over any span of time. It could be shorter or longer than 4 years. But the key is that you earn a small part of the degree at a time, and that there could be many combinations possible to earn the same degree. And you can acquire these micro credentials anywhere so long as the learning outcomes are achieved. You could think of it as pieces of a puzzle that can make fit in many different ways and give you a different final picture. So this global convention is already adopted and launched since November 2019. And we do also have regionally some regional conventions. For example, in Asia and Pacific, it's called the Tokyo Convention. Tokyo Convention is dealing with higher education. So it's a regional convention that allow, for example, the mobility of students, but not only that, but which also looks at the qualification frameworks and then the content of the programs. In the European context, it's called the Bologna process. In Africa, it is Addis Ababa Convention. So those are the reflections that are ongoing and the work which is being done by UNESCO.
Yeah, very good, very interesting insights. Yeah, I mean, it's again a mammoth task, but I think clearly, as you said, learning is continuous. Yeah, and I think if people recognize that learning is something that you have to continue as technology changes every day, and adoption of new technologies is so fast. I think as that being the baseline principle of learning, I think it's sounds like the right way to go. So thanks for that insight. Maybe switching track a little bit now to you, Marcus. So again, it's nice to have different representation in the panel today. Obviously, you being in Germany, we have obviously Bosch as a German company also represented. But Marcus, maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into the German framework. We're all very familiar with the world famous dual vocational training model in Germany, and maybe you can give us some insights into how that works and also the role of the more formal degree in the German context.
Yeah, fine, sure, I will do. But give me the chance first to comment on Omar's perspectives with regards to lifelong learning. This, from my point of view, is very much important. I think it's a self-understanding for all of us in the meantime. And it bridges for me a little bit also the gap to the requirements or need for higher educational degrees or curricula, because this is really much one aim to prepare students in their higher education to be able for self-learning, to allow them to learn how to train themselves in the past and the following learning journey, which will stay for these guys all the life. So I think this is a very much important piece in the field of higher educational systems as well. And thanks for giving me the chance to talk about the dual system in Germany, because from my point of view, this also reflects then the need which perfectly Dr. Gohl did describe as well. Yeah. So what bridges the gap between the degree system and the schooling or the higher educational system, and the need which companies have to employ students after their learning experience. And for me, this is the best fit or the best outcome of the dual vocational system in Germany. And now we'll answer your question precisely, Tim. In the end, the success of the dual vocational system in Germany is behind the word dual. On the one hand side, dual means that a vocational training in Germany, which is aiming on level 4 of the European qualification framework, is a combination between an employer and a company which employs the student from the very first day, and a vocational school. So it's a mutual approach to guide a student through school, but as well through the company. So it means half of the time the student is spending in school, and the other half of the time already in the company from the very first day on. For sure, starting with basic work, but yeah, week after week, it's getting higher and higher. And in parallel, the vocational school prepares the student with qualifications, competences, and academic and background knowledge about that. So this is one very much important piece from a point of view, which could also be adopted for higher educational learning journeys as well, in a combination of employing companies, but also the schools. And the other very much important advantage of the German vocational system is that it is a standardized curriculum, which is the same if you do it in a company X in the south of Germany or a company Y in the north of Germany. It is a standardized curriculum. So every employer, after knowing, yeah, the guy was in that vocational school and has a certificate of X, you exactly know what is the curricula behind, and you can really be sure that there's a qualification level which you in your specific company can directly use for your daily work. So this is very much a second advantage. That's a high level of standardization from a perspective of a student, but as well of future employers which are looking for qualifications. Just in a nutshell, yeah. I can talk a day about that.
Maybe just, yeah, maybe just another couple of minutes, Marcus, with a kind of actually a couple of follow-up questions to that. I think when you're talking about the degree, so how does it work in the German context in terms of harmonization or recognition of qualifications? So if somebody who goes through a vocational training track does want to go and get a formal degree or do a master's program, for example, how does it work in terms of recognition?
Yeah, and this is what we, from my point of view, which was a big success more or less 10 years before, when we did agree in the European Union to the European Qualification Framework, which is an 8 steps framework, starting from really basic education and qualification up to PhD level, which is number 8. So if you then go through a vocational training and you are successful, you end up in level 4, which is quite comparable to, in the European framework, comparable to a high school degree. Yeah, so this is what we balanced by that framework, that we can compare vocational degrees and schooling degrees one to the other. And by doing that, giving the chance from a vocational training, which ends in level 4, to start then in higher education on universities to get level 5 or 6. So this is in the end what is behind the curricula, standardization, but also entry level for higher education there.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I mean, I think there's the 8-step framework, I think, is something where there are lots of local or regional qualification frameworks. Obviously, India has their own qualification framework, which is also being worked on. And I think that is such an important step in terms of enabling career progression. Also, is taking steps and understanding and having visibility of the steps that you can take to promote your qualifications and opportunity for progression in a career. And I think that please, yeah.
So, sorry to interrupt you, Tim. Yeah, but there is also a because I just, as you may have heard, I'm a fan of the dual vocational system. But there's also a disadvantage here. As more it is standardized, as more it is also slow to adapt to new technologies, to new developments in the markets. And this is for sure a need we have to cover as well, to be more flexible, quicker in adjusting curricula and so on and so on. As Dr. Goel mentioned, development are speeding up, and so our curricula and our review of curricula needs to speed up as well.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one last follow-up, which will feed back into I think to ASDC, for example, is the role of industry. Yeah, and I think one of the big successes in Germany is the strength of industry and the role that industry has played in building this vocational structure. And I think one of the things I've often heard about also being in Germany is that loyalty in the German market. When you start your apprenticeship with Siemens or Bosch or Daimler, you tend to, at least used to, spend 20 years, 30 years of your career with the same company. So that loyalty meant that the investment in the process was very worthwhile. And I know that from experiences working in different markets in Asia, also in India, the challenge of employee loyalty, if you like, and the effort that an industrial partner has to play in terms of training and developing an individual is one of the hardest challenges to overcome, because of the nature of the fact that skills are changing so quickly and people are eager to shift jobs for small changes in salary, for example. Yeah, so there's lots of that. So I guess the question, coming back to the question, is more to do with current status. Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's huge change happening in industry, and what is the current role of industry, and how is the program sort of working closely with industry to ensure that this competition for talent isn't going to interrupt the structure of the dual model?
Question to me? Yeah.
To you, Marcus. Yeah, sorry. So how does changing technology affect? Yeah.
So industry for sure is pushing very hard the vocational system to be more flexible, to adjust on new technologies, and to review the curricula much faster than before. Yeah, there are still jobs in that system which today already no one needs. But in future it will be, as mentioned before, speed up, and we need to adjust more quickly. Especially, and this is for me very much needed as well. Dr. Goel mentioned it already. I think in all of the different areas, one need to be completely clear. In all curricula, digital literacy, as I call it, needs to be put into all curricula, because what is completely clear in future, technology, digitization will touch all professions. And so I think this is also very much a need of the German industry to put that mindset and did basic qualifications in field of technology and digital literacy to all the curricula in the vocational training itself.
Okay. Yeah, very good. Well, then with that, I think moving to a strong industry-driven body, to you, Arindam. Yeah. So within the automotive space, as mentioned in the introductions as well, the automotive space is going through massive transition and change driven by technology. So maybe give us a little bit of insight on the role that industry is playing within the automotive space, especially in line with the type of training that ASDC is delivering and the future vision of what the next steps are going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think automotive, is so exciting because it pulls in so many different technologies together at one place. And more so in today's context because, when we talk in a very current context of what's troubling the Indian auto industry at this moment in the supply chain, it's about semiconductors. And that was probably the last thing one would have thought about in automotives. People would have thought about supply of steel or uh, rubber or whatever else, but that is how the industry has completely progressed. Um, and therefore the whole task of skilling people is very challenging. But before I come specifically to the industry changes that are there, picking on from what my previous speakers have already spoken about, what I personally think is, and what we're trying to also look at with our various industry partners is, how do you distribute this whole degree program learning time throughout your career and journey? Because especially when you look at, when you do a 4-year program, let's say, and completely focused on 4-year program, but you are preparing to come into an industry, and as Omar said, it's not about like getting into a research job or something like that, but more to do with an operational job or whatever. In that case, you may not necessarily need that upfront investment of 4 years specifically coming in handy, but you need to do that 4 year over a period of your lifetime because you need to pick on the new skills that are required, and it's always going to be like that, So, I mean, if I take an example from the automotive industry, typically, parts which or technologies which become mainstream or kind of mandatory features in a car, uh, you can get a broad sense of that by looking at the accessories market of the automotive industry. So if many years back, maybe a couple of decades back in the Indian market, for instance, a car entertainment system used to be an accessory. It hardly used to come fitted from the factory. Now today, that's standard, and people are differentiating between models about what kinds of infotainment systems actually come in. It's not a question of whether one infotainment system is there or not. Uh, Now, looking at that, if I make a equivalence of that in the skill space for human beings, I would say that digital skills were like special skills, which had to be put on top of what you were doing. But today it's becoming standard. Everybody needs to have that, Just going back many years, while we were in school, people had to learn typing specifically for those jobs which needed a typing. But today, nobody learns typing. Everyone types. Okay. And that's the transition that one needs to make. So used to call programmers separately in companies. And even today, probably programmers still exist. But my view is that maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, everybody will actually do their programming that they need to do. Essentially, coding will become a very generic skill in that sense. So with that in mind, I think how ASDC is looking at is picking up from the German dual system itself also, is the whole system of apprenticeship, which has got a lot of push from the government of India now. And we see a lot of traction. Industry is very, very forthcoming. I think that's a wonderful way to initiate a workforce into a specific job role that the person definitely needs to get started with. So rather than investing, let's say, a 4-year degree program, if a person can invest 2 or 3 years in a apprenticeship program, the person is much more readily employable, and it solves also industry's problems in terms of getting a person who's already invested 4 years of their time in the college, kind of unlearning some of the stuff which they don't need to know for their job that they are being employed for, and then also train them specifically for something that they need to know, but they haven't got. They haven't got the inputs in the college, let's say. So it's a very, I would say, an inefficient process of getting younger people into the workforce, and that's where I think the value of industry-led training programs, with the kind of work, let's say, Bosch in India is doing. The vocational training center has been one of the earliest training centers led by the industry. And if I think it has benefited, if it has benefited anybody the most, it's been Bosch, because I think a lot of their output from the vocational training centers have actually gone on to take very, very critical and important positions within the organization. And that's how it works very well. It's a win-win-win situation for everyone at the end of the day. So I think that's the core of what the industry, the industry and the academia in India specifically has been working in two different silos. Now, if those two work together, just like in the German dual system, for instance, I think you get the best results in terms of producing just the kind of people that you need for the industry. And people also get the right kind of education for the kind of jobs that they are going to get into.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that insight. And I think also leading into a question that we've actually received in the feedback at the moment is wanting to know about the best approach for upgrading students during their academics as per current industry standards. And I think that leads into what you were saying, what we've all been saying really, but I think particularly in the Indian context, yeah. So the role that industry is playing in higher education, and you look at progressive colleges, progressive universities that are increasingly having tie-ups with industry, but in principle for extracurricular or additional added value courses that are very industry relevant. And I think that really, maybe Dr. Gaurav, for you, I know that Bosch also works substantially with numbers of institutes across India for having specialized training centers as additional components, but maybe you can give some insights on more the role that industry can have in making degree programs more industry relevant. Obviously, the process of changing curriculum is very time-consuming and very bureaucratic, but the role that industry can play, where at the end of the day, industry is absorbing these people, maybe give us some insights into that collaborative approach.
Sure, Tim. Let me first talk at the ITI level, and then I will come to the degree level. Sure. At the ITI level, we work with 3 state governments, and we have a MOU signed with 88 ITIs, where we support them in modernizing their curriculum, training their teachers, and also setting up the modern labs in these ITIs. So that has been a very successful venture from Bosch, where this 2 years program of the technical training, which happens in the ITI, which was typically run on the outdated curriculum, is now getting modernized, and some of the students are also getting an opportunity to do internship in Bosch Group companies, and also some of the Bosch suppliers. But I would still see this as quite far away from what happens in Germany, as Marcus explained about the VET dual system in Germany, which we know is world famous. It's our dream here in India as to when can the industry get that kind of a flexibility of running this program in dual mode. In India, I believe we still are, the government's role particularly is that of a regulator and not so much of a facilitator. So why I see this so very successful in Germany is because the government facilitates, does not regulate so much. So you are given so much of freedom to the industry. So that much of the freedom, if you give to the industry here in India, to the organizations like whether it is CII or FICCI or NESCOM or others, I think a lot more can be achieved here in India as well. Coming at the degree level in Bosch, we have tie-up with the universities to run a BVOC program, a Bachelor in Vocation, let's say example in mechatronics, where 50% of the training happens in the classroom of the universities, And they also have the labs, by the way, for the basic training. And 50% of the training happens inside Bosch, in the Bosch Vocational Center, plus also on the shop floor. So we are trying out these models and we find it very, very successful. The challenge is what I see here in India, particularly when I compared with Germany, is that typically no one wants to send their sons and daughters to the vocational training because of perhaps the image in the society what we have. I find it very common for someone who has come through an apprenticeship program in Germany to become a CEO of a Bosch Group company there in Germany. I can't imagine that here in India, typically any CEO of a Bosch Group company or any other company for that matter here, as long as the company is large enough, would have come from this degree program, master, bachelor degree or master degree. So the vocabulary what we use here is of vocational training, or the, typically people think that this is suitable only for the blue collar worker. As we know now in the industry, the blue collared and white collared, that dark line in between that is now dimming up. So we perhaps need a third collar in between. You need the people who can also work as white collar, but they are skilled. Otherwise, in all along, we were thinking that the blue collar are skilled and the white collar only should know the things and they should only have the knowledge. But now you know, now you need the knowledgeable workers. So you also need the hand skills at that level, and that I think can come through the apprenticeship system if this is implemented properly. Arindam mentioned that yes, no doubt, Bosch has been the biggest beneficiary of the apprenticeship system here, which we are running for last 59 years. But we also have quite a lot of our alumni who are actually working abroad. Many of them are working in Australia. Perhaps the biggest alumni association of Bosch Vocational Center is in Sydney and not in Bangalore. But of course, we have quite a few of them also working here for Bosch.
Very good. Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, obviously, it's fascinating what Bosch has done over such a long period of time as well. Maybe again, we're just keeping an eye on time as well. One topic you mentioned is around perception and the perception of different levels of qualification, which is a very, very tough hurdle to cross. But I think there is work being done, and one of the roles around that for me is around the topic of employability skills and core skills as well. And I think that when you're looking at that baseline, what's the real difference between someone who's gone through a degree program and somebody who's gone through a vocational program? Often you're looking at things like language, ability to express oneself, ability to work in a team, ability to do these certain things. And I know for me that probably more than my economics background at university, I think my soft skills and independence was probably the thing I gained more from university than I did from any other skill, to be honest. And I shouldn't tell my parents that, but that's probably true. But I think maybe to Omar, for you, I think the topic of employability skills and core skills, I think it's something that isn't talked about enough, in my opinion. So we're still talking about the technical skills that someone needs to do a job, as opposed to the core skills that help someone progress and become, at the end of the day, a more rounded human, a more rounded person with a skill set. So what's UNESCO doing in that area?
Thank you, Tim. And I think Dr. Gaul was really set the scene for this. Of course, no education system can prepare learners fully for jobs in rapidly changing environments. Having said that, we can give some core skills that will always be relevant, no matter the job, and sometimes they are called the 21st century skills. Some people call it the 21st century skills, but I don't like to call it the 21st century skills, because these 21st century skills were also quite relevant during the 16th century. It's needed, it's the core, right? And I think it includes what we call the higher order thinking skills, which includes the decision-making, problem-solving, critical thinking, creativity, innovation. It includes also the personal skills, so self-awareness, autonomy, initiative, adaptability, and resilience, negotiation, and self-regulation. We have also the interpersonal social skills, communication, relationship building, empathy, collaboration, compassion, leadership. And the last set is the multi-literacy skills. We call it multi-literacy skills because literacy is needed both in foundational literacy and numeracy, but also in financial literacy, business literacy, media literacy, technological literacy, and digital citizenship, you name it, a lot of literacy things. So, but much more is needed. Those are just the core. I think much more is needed, and UNESCO is pushing for this reflection and then also trying to influence the policies to reflect these in the education systems. Much more is needed and to impart skills in schools and colleges. Work-based learning and apprenticeship are critical to provide hands-on learning, perhaps the best way to train someone to be effective in a job environment. And we heard Dr. Goel said that they also had some MOUs with ITIs and they have some practice. So what we're trying to do is to capture those practices and then try and influence the policies to make it evidence-based policy so that it can be upscaled. The other aspect is to train students from a young age to be open to different types of career options, including also self-employment. And economic security depends a lot of being self-reliant and having skills that can enable you to be out of a job, but still earn a livelihood. This pandemic has shown us the that wage employment can be volatile and dependent on the trajectory of the economy. Therefore, career guidance assumes special importance. Career guidance can help improve the image of technical and vocational education and training, not only in the minds of young people, but also in the minds of their parents. In India, career aspirations are often narrow, unrealistic, and distorted by social background. This can enable more students to opt for vocational subjects in schools and follow up by enrolling in skill-oriented courses after completing school education for a range of career opportunities. At the same time, career guidance can also highlight the importance of being self-employed and pursuing an entrepreneurial career, an aspect that is often ignored. The joy, flexibility, and the economic freedom of being your own boss as an entrepreneur is something career guidance can help young adults also to appreciate. We have made several recommendations in our latest publication, the 2020 State of the Education Report for India, which focused on technical and vocational education training towards improving the ecosystem. And one of the most significant recommendations calls for placing learners and their aspirations at the heart of TVET programs, which highlights vocational aptitude tests coupled with career counseling and guidance as key support measures that need to be made available to all learners. We are also calling for better integration of skills in schools educations, which is completely in line with the new education policy here in India, which was recently launched after 34 years of old policy. This came out last year, October 2020, and it's clearly setting the scene, saying that 50% of the population in the school education, that's the target, that's the vision. They want to divert 50% towards vocationalization, technical and vocational education training. And the Ministry of Education has also laid the ground for the vocationalization of school education. So meaning that vocational education is going to be put at an early stage in schools. So this is what we've been working on. And of course, we have the important report that came out recently, which have a set of recommendations. And this is one of the great challenges that we are facing here in India, which is most of the time linked to the status of TVET itself. People, when they are high achievers and they have high learning outcomes, they don't opt for TVET institutions, and that's not correct. That should be corrected.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I think, you know, obviously India has its own, has many challenges in terms of pure volumes of people that are also young population that are coming into the workforce, that puts tremendous pressure on industry also to absorb as many people as possible, which, you know, you can't expect Bosch to hire 200,000 people every year in India. It's not realistic. And likewise, across the industry sectors, it's so challenging for industry to take the burden of hiring millions of people across India every year, which I think is part and parcel of this development sort of conundrum that is there. But I think that's also where employability skill comes in. So, you know, the topic of entrepreneurship and innovation, and I think that goes down to all levels, not just, you know, starting the next Facebook. Yeah. So you're looking at, you know, being able to be self-sufficient, being able to have those core skills that enable you to earn a wage and to start changing your dynamic. So I think these are all incredibly important to the bigger picture of solving challenges to do with overarching scale of growth of different economies and absorbing lots of people into the workforce. Again, conscious of time, I have to admit, we could talk for hours, and I think I'd like to continue it, and maybe we have to do another panel. But just one comment from my side. I have on my chart here of questions to ask, I have a whole topic around COVID, and I have to admit, it's actually very refreshing to have a whole discussion about the future of education without once really mentioning the topic of COVID-19 and its impact. Yeah, so I think I will keep that one parked because we all know that it's had a big impact, but regardless to that, all it's probably done is sped up the process of change. Yeah, but other than that, I think anyway there is a natural shift that is taking place, and we're all eager to see that take another level of development. So what I'd like to do, as we're really running short of time, and again, I have to acknowledge there are some questions also that have been asked that we will get to outside of the session. So we will follow up on our media channels with answers to some of those questions. But I would like to just hand over to a brief conclusion, starting with you, Marcus, on your thoughts around the discussion and the overarching question of the role of the degree.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to start with that. Completely unprepared.
Yep.
My key takeaways, or also my personal opinion is, I think the structure of degrees is important, not just because of the degree itself, but because of to equip people for their lifelong learning journey. I think this is very much intended as a second learning or a second portion of the degree system as well. Second, I think industry and universities and schools need to align much more to prepare, nevertheless, the people better for jobs. As I mentioned, a good example is the dual system. And third, keep all digital literacy and technology basics in all curriculums, because I think it's very much needed. That's my key takeaway. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Marcus. And I think I think final one, Arindam, I'd really like to get your input on your take, especially in the role of ASDC. So your 3 key takeaways would be great.
I think, you know, most importantly, top of the list will be that degrees are required, but not everybody requires a degree, you know. So I think we need to be focused on that requirement. Second, I think, as Marcus has already probably pointed out, but I would rate it very high, is that the industry and the academic institutions need to work closely, because that's what can make both of them much more sustainable in the long term. The educational institutes need to deliver to the needs of the industry, and the industry needs to make the educational institutes aware of what their exact requirements are. And finally, I think there is a need to prepare students for the constant change. So whether we call digital literacy or X literacy or Y literacy, I think the most important literacy is about their ability to keep learning how to learn new things. The best education that I've got in my educational career was this one phrase which has stuck to me is first learn how to learn. And if you learn how to learn, then you can learn anything that you want to learn, essentially. So it's difficult, but it's important for our academic institutions to focus on this core. That's
very
all
good
from my side. Thank you.
Oh, very good. Arunam, thank you for that. Gentlemen, I'd love to, Dr. Goel, I'd love to hear your closing thoughts. Have you got a very brief closing remark? Same for you, Omar, as well. But Dr. Goel?
Thanks, Tim. I wouldn't repeat what Marcus and Arindam said, and I completely agree with them. So my take beyond that would be we should work on improving the quality of vocational education in India. We should do something to inculcate the pride in profession for the people who undergo the vocational training programs. We should start talking more about the NSQF framework. Arindam works a lot on it, I know, and it's very important framework for the country, but I think it has not got its due importance yet. So we should start talking more about it. And if all these put together become part of acquiring a degree, then I think the degree. But if the degrees are independent of all this, then I think the degrees are now becoming redundant. Is what my take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Omar, final few words from you.
Yes. So of course I agree with everybody, and I very much like what Dr. Goel just said on the national skills qualification and qualification framework, which could really build a bridge towards the qualification and make the degrees relevant to the needs of the market and the industry. But of course, also educators have to reflect and realize the need for more lifelong learning, need to acquire more digital skills, to be comfortable in changing and adapting the new tools, devices, and platforms, and treat actually the digital platforms and then the ICT tools as tools, but not an end by itself. And of course, the last point now I would like to say is that we need this to the learners to experiment more. So experimenting would mean in this context trying new options, learning new skills, and applying existing skills in new environments. So I think that goes in line with what Mr. Prandam said on learning to learn, but also learning to become, because we will face challenges as we go in the future. Many more challenges will be hitting the education systems and also challenging the context. So thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. So I think what's exciting is I think all of your outcomes lead actually into our next step discussions. Yeah. So I think our next discussion on next week on Thursday is around the topic of the jobs of tomorrow. So what are the jobs of tomorrow, and how can you get more information about that? And then our final one is lifelong learning. So I think very, very poignant and fit very well into the discussion. So again, from my side, I think as a final takeaway, I won't repeat anything except that I think the topic of degrees are required, but having a degree is not necessarily required. From Arindam, I think that was a very good point that concludes really our discussion. So again, from my side, thank you very much to all our panelists. It's been a pleasure having you as part of the discussion. Look forward to continuing it both formally and informally as we go forward. And to our audience, thank you for joining, and we look forward to another discussion in a week's time. So please join us for that. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a good weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.